music attracted me, and my young sister and I stood and listened to the Salvation Army open-air service every Friday evening. And as I think about it now, I remember thinking that someday I would like to be one of the people standing in that circle. Well, some people fight against the call of God to go to the Salvation Army Training College. For me, it was the other way around. I had to fight to go.
When I was a young teenager, I just felt that the Lord was really calling me into this kind of a ministry with people. And then as I got a little older, I sort of put it off. And it wasn't until I met Jim, and I knew that he had similar inclinations, that it sort of sealed things together.
I had lived a relatively sheltered life. Grew up in a small community, had not been exposed to the cries of the world, and then all of a sudden, you wake up and you see it, and then you feel that you want to become a part of helping to meet that need. So that's basically how the call came.
The opportunities that officership provides are probably far greater now than even 10 or 15, 20 years ago. The challenges are there. There are a number of specialized areas that have developed in corrections, health, social services. So I would really encourage our young people to gain as much training and knowledge and qualification as they can, combined with a sense of Christian commitment.
I went over on a 3-year contract with the Army's lay contract program based on the things that I wanted to be involved in, basically development, but also evangelism, that the Salvation Army offered the largest scope for working in that area. I made a decision to make an application for training college.
I graduated from university in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and then I did my teacher training in Toronto. After that, I taught for 6 years in Bermuda. I knew that there was something else that God wanted me to do with my life. I felt and sensed and knew that He was calling me to full-time service for Him.
In our academic studies, we take everything from theology to Christian counseling, and we are in class most mornings. Wednesday evening is usually an involvement in the community, sometimes at senior citizens' homes or those kinds of places. In the second year, they appoint us to one corps for the whole year, and we share with the officers there each week in their responsibilities.
The field placements show me that there were many needs and many people in many different areas.
You seem to be on the go all the time. There's very little help in a small course, so you have to look after all the correspondence and typing and planning, and that takes up quite a bit of time. You find yourself as a public relations man, for sure, and then you have to associate and meet the mayor and the police chief, attend Kiwanis and all those kind of things. You look after the welfare in the town, and there'd be, about 5 or 6 cases a week. Then on top of that, you have your pastoral duties of visitation and your preaching ministry and preparation. And even though you have all those activities, I guess I've always kept number one the spiritual vitality of individuals' lives.
You start out, your work is really evangelism. I knew that when I started. So the main reward, as far as I'm concerned, is turning people around.
The family services responsibilities primarily are addressing the needs of people, quite often in a material sense, but also emotional and spiritual. We provide food, clothing, and furniture from a material standpoint, but we also provide a lot of counseling. In a city like Vancouver, one only has to look at the streets at any given time of the day to realize that the problems are manifold. It's a tragedy when we see young people on the streets that are prostituting themselves, who are into drugs, who have absolutely no hope, apparently, as far as life is concerned. There seems to be that barrier that we have to overcome.
It's also very difficult to work with these people because they are the ones who are most prone to fail. They have thrived on failure. They are survivors. They exist. It could be discouraging were it not for the tremendous number of people that we are seeing who, in fact, are changing.
Both my wife and I have been involved in this correctional ministry right from the very early days of my involvement in corrections back at the House of Concord. I had met my wife while working there. And the role of the officer wife has really grown and developed over this last 10 or 15 years in terms of corrections. And so she's presently the National Coordinator for Volunteers for Corrections in Canada and Bermuda.
As far as changes in the attitudes of the Army, I believe that they are becoming more open and more willing to hear not just what my husband has to say about his life and his goals for him personally, but also that I am a participant in that process.
In working with individuals, you are really trying to assess potential and helping the individual to find fulfillment in using that potential within the Army.
One has to look at a continuing education program, I think, for the rest of one's career, actually, in order to keep up with new ideas, with new changes in society, changes in attitudes, changes in mores, and just developing technology as well.
As the director, my responsibility is to keep the ship afloat. My job mostly is to supervise coordinators and senior management staff. I do a lot of reading. I set the tone for the agency along with a number of staff, but I really respond to the enthusiasm and the aliveness, if you will, that I find in the Salvation Army. It's exciting. I feel very rich spiritually being a Salvation Army officer, and I find it difficult to think of the sacrifices. But of course, along the way, there have been disappointments. I am a single officer, and that has in the past perhaps made it a very lonely road at times.
In my own personal life, I recall as a single officer being assigned to Vancouver, British Columbia, when the young lady I was to be married to was assigned in Toronto. And I shall never forget the struggles that went on in my heart trying to handle that reality in my life. Fortunately, that worked out beautifully. We are happily married now.
When we had received farewell orders from New Waterford, my husband and I said, anywhere but Grace Bay. Almost tempted to write headquarters about it, and we said, no, if this is the Lord's will for us, we will go. And on we went to Glace Bay, and we had 4 of our happiest years in service at Glace Bay.
The year we were opening the halfway house, which was a new venture, and went in, I think was the March after we'd been there for 8 or 9 months, and told them how much we were enjoying the situation and getting settled in there, and inevitably we moved that June, and that happened to us the next year. So over the last couple of appointments, having been 5 and 6 years in those, usually we stay rather low-key when it comes around March or April time when we know they're doing moves.
The matter of flexibility in appointments is something that I think is an ongoing consideration for all of us who are responsible for making appointments. We are trying to encourage longer stays as a policy, and where officers are fitting in well in assignments, yes, we do listen to requests that they stay on.
My wife and I have been Corps officers for 23 years, and the Christian life is not a static life. It's one of growth, it's one of development. It is having a greater appreciation of God's will for one's life. There isn't anything we'd rather be doing than being Salvation Army Corps officers fulfilling the will of the Lord.
Personally, I went through a very intense stress period which related to severe financial problems in appointments. One appointment in particular, there was no way out of the financial difficulties, and the stress was incredible. I found that very difficult to deal with.
So you have to budget for 2 years, including your car, insurance, all those sorts of things. We have to pay tuition when we come, a small tuition. We pay for our books and our uniforms, but our food and our accommodation is provided for us.
We are part of the Special French Ministry Training Program for cadetship. We are presently located in Montreal, but we are also working in different corps throughout Quebec. We come to Toronto periodically with our children for special events or spiritual days in order so that we can find fellowship with our session mates.
If you feel definitely that God is calling you to officership, God doesn't change his mind. That's his plan and purpose for your life. And be sure to count the cost and be ready to pay the price, because one never knows what field they may be serving in.
For me, the main reward is a sense of fulfilled purpose in life. I know what God wants of me. I know what my purpose in life is, and officership has fulfilled that for me.
Just the core life and getting to know people, I think, is very important to me, and getting to know them on a personal basis that's more than just a hello and shake your hand, but getting to know their needs and being able to help them to cope with the things that they're going through. It's really been a highlight for me.
The benefits or the adventure or the opportunities have far outweighed some of the disappointments or the difficulties.
Think carefully, and if you sense that in looking at all the options, there is still a strong, inescapable, driving urge to consider officership, then pursue it with the totality of your personality. For if you do, you certainly can experience a deep sense of peace and fulfillment, and certainly unlimited opportunity of helping your fellow man.